3, 2, 1 más.
Hi, everybody. Unfortunately, our TikTok connection didn't work, but our Facebook and our YouTube one did. So, good afternoon or good morning, depending on which time zone you're in. Thanks for coming and joining me today. We're going to be painting Bon Appetito. Last week we did the lemon piece with the Bon Appetit. So this week I thought we'd do something with a little bit of a Tuscan vibe and focus almost exclusively on floating and line work. So this one is going to be a lot of fun. Floating is one of those things that so many of us call the F word because it drives us nuts. It either works really, really well or it doesn't work at all. So what are you doing? Oh, Maze is here. Okay. I was wondering what you were doing.
Just chilling.
Yeah. So, what was I? Oh, I completely lost my train of thought derailed. There were no survivors. I'm having one of those days. So today we're going to be painting Bon Appetito. We're going to be doing some fun texture techniques for the background using just glaze and paint. And we're going to focus on the line work and floating, which is two of the most important things that we learn aside from stroke work. Floating and line work are really important with decorative painting. So we're going to focus on those two technical aspects today. And with a little bit of luck, I'll be able to say hi to some people if I can see the chat. Thank you.
I want to see what it looks like.
You want to see what it looks like? It looks just like that.
Good.
Looks pretty good. There you go. Oh my goodness, there's all sorts of you in here today. Becky Underwood is here. And Kim McCutcheon and Chris Neese. Hi, Chris. Kathy Williams, Lois Pritchard. My buddy in France, Patrick. Nice to see you here. Say hi to Eddie for me. Susan Fanning, Carol Colbert, hello, doll. And Janet Mills from Oklahoma. My goodness. So everybody's getting up and out of bed this morning. And Donna, thank you for the happy mail. Oh, you're very welcome, Donna. I'm glad it got there. And Liz Minardo from Toronto, thank you for joining me. And Margaret Davis from Northeast Ohio. And Cindy Welty from Virginia. My heavens, everybody is in here today. And Tara Ellis. Gail Jensen. Marlene Dombrowski. Hello. My heavens, everybody is here today. That's awesome. So this piece is, I kind of wanted to play with that whole Bon Appetit idea. And then, I don't know, I just felt like doing something Tuscan. And playing with some landscape and whatnot. So this is a fun piece to do. It's not difficult to do, but it is a fun piece to do. We do have giveaways today, 2 of them. We have 2 fabulous giveaways, actually. So we have a fantastic set of colored pencils, 2 of them to give away today. We have an incredible set of Dynasty Black Gold brushes. They're miniature brushes, so they're designed for painting miniatures. So tiny little fans, tiny little angles, tiny little flats, fabulous, fabulous brushes. Not to mention there's a gorgeous little detail brush in there too. So we have 2 sets of those to give away, both 5 brush sets, which is a really nice gift. And then of course we always have our own little giveaways that we tuck in there from both Renee and myself. So we have a little create bag and we filled it up with a bunch of little goodies just for you. So at the end of today's live, we'll take all of the names from the chat, both on Facebook and on YouTube. They go onto the wheel and we spin it. And 2 of you are going to win those giveaways. So don't forget, join us in the chat. Tell us where you're watching from, and because we love to know. And with a little bit of luck and God willing, you'll win one of those giveaways. So if you guys are ready to get started on our Bon Appetito, so am I. Fingers crossed the camera works. Yay! It works. You had to make a choice between Sharknado or watching. Well, I'm so glad I beat the Sharks. That's always good. And hi, Diane. Always generous giveaways. You know what, Diana? I am very fortunate that I have some really, really generous sponsors too. So people that help supply those giveaways. I've been very, very fortunate with that. And I love sending out goodies. It just has a big feel-good factor. So this is the piece we're doing today, and it exclusively relies on floating and line work. It's not a difficult piece to paint. Truly, it really is not. The nice part is, although it looks fairly textured, it's not. It's actually quite smooth. So we're going to have a little fun with that. Creating that nice textured background is super simple, and you're going to love it. And then we're just going to use floats. There's little or no base coating in this one, which is always fun. In fact, the only base coat we have is the surface, that background color. And so it's super easy. The color that I'm working with for the background on this one is called Almondine. Now, if you don't have Almondine, buttermilk will work. We're just looking for sort of a creamy yellow to beige color. Oyster beige would work. You just need something with a warm tone in that background. So what I'm using today is Almondine, and the color number for that one is DA403. Always a really great color to work with. It's nicely opaque. This is one coat. One coat, and it covered almost perfectly. So I'm going to show you how I put that color on. And this is where my belief of neatness doesn't count and perfection is to be avoided at all costs comes into play. We want to create a little bit of visual texture in here. And in order to get that look, we need to have a little physical texture as well, but only a little. So I'm picking up a little bit of that Almondine with just a small amount of either water or glaze, just to keep it moving. And we're going to apply it to the surface like this. Neatness does not count. Perfection is to be avoided at all cost. We want, if you look at this, you see all of those brush marks in there. We want those. So don't brush this out smooth. Let some of those brush marks remain. So there is our texture. You can take it right to the edge. Use the most beat up, ugly travesty of a brush that you can find in your paint supplies. In my my turns is this one. It's the fugly brush. This one has seen better days. As you can tell, there's a reason why it's called a fugly brush. This one has been seriously used and seriously loved. It is a natural bristle brush. It's a little on the coarse side, and so it creates some really nice brush marks in there. So that's what we want, is we want some brush marks in there. So I'm going to clean out that brush, and we're going to dry this. I love this color. This is a very pretty neutral. It's very soft. There's Debbie Easton. Hello, Deb. And Ann Fogg. Hello. Liz Minardo. I love the slap method, too. It works really well. Linda Giesbrich from Winnipeg. Hello, sweetie. Oh, Debbie, you're very welcome. Debbie says thank you for my Just Because gift. It was fantastic. I'm glad you got it. Thank you. Everybody on earth needs a fugly brush. I completely agree, Debbie. So there we have it. It is painted. It has a nice, fully opaque background. It has a very fine texture to it, little tiny brush marks in it. And that's what's going to give this that sort of distressed plaster look, is that brush mark in the background. So the next thing that we need for this is we need some color. Now, I used a little bit of raw sienna. I love raw sienna for this. It's just, there's something about this color. So raw sienna on the palette. And we're going to need a little bit of asphaltum on the palette. Somebody show Noah the door, please. So we have 2 pieces of shop towel. I took a page of shop towel and I cut it in half. And then I'm going to tear it in half once again. And we've got 1 piece we're going to crumple into a little ball and tuck it inside the other sheet until we get this really nice soft pillow. This is our high-tech applicator. I love using that word, high-tech applicator. So we're going to use a little raw sienna first. So you want to get your applicator wet. Just wet with a little bit of water or a little bit of glaze. You don't need to have a ton of water. It doesn't have, you don't want it dripping or anything like that, but you do want it wet. And you're going to pick up a little bit of raw sienna. And we're going to rub in a circular fashion like this. I call this fuzzy worms. We're going to use fuzzy worms. Change directions frequently. And then you're going to continue with that until you have the surface covered. And the idea is to create lots of variation in those tones and in those textures. Just like that. Hi, Jan. I'm so glad you found us. What was this? Good morning. I can see the screen on my phone sideways too. Yes, Renee figured out how to do that today. And totally by accident, we were trying to get us onto TikTok. And we're missing something, obviously, so we thought, well, it either works or it doesn't. And it didn't work this morning, so we'll figure it out. There's a learning curve to everything. So again, just gently, you're washing the baby's face, not scrubbing the kitchen floor. That's what I keep telling people when you do this. So I've got a little bit of color. Now I'm going to dry that and then I'm going to repeat the process. There's Pat Rowe. Hello, Pat. Hi, Elizabeth. You know what? You're on, yeah. Don't blame the mailman. You can blame customs. We've had so many things go missing. It's been such a frustrating time, but Elizabeth will make sure that you get your goodies. Don't worry. It may take a little time, but we'll make sure you get them. Since all this foolishness started, we've had so many pieces of mail go missing. Hi, Gail. This is actually a really easy technique. And it's easy to control it because you're working with just a small amount of paint. It looks like a lot on there, but it really isn't. So here we go. So I think I'm happy with it at this point. I don't want it to be too dark, but I think I like it. We kind of want to create that an all over dry plaster look. And we want it to be kind of soft. Does it ever come back to us? It does, but sometimes it takes quite a while. We have had probably a dozen or so packages that just never come back. It just, which is frustrating, but it is what it is. So I'm going to dry this. Oh, well, the other pain is that because there's such a backlog at customs, on a weekly basis, is that there are times where we can't even get weigh bills to ship across the border. So, because they're holding off because of the backlog. So I try not to ship if I know there's a backlog because I don't want them sitting there. Hi, Linda Johnson. Good to have you. So I've switched to a little bit of asphaltum. Just a little. And I'm going to very softly. Notice I haven't picked up any more moisture. You don't want this applicator too wet at this point. So I like to pick up a little asphaltum and just rub a little into corners, a few spots along the edges. You can come in quite a ways. I mean, you can come in as far as you want, really. But I like the irregularities that this helps create and that little bit of contrast. Now, I'm only using 2 colors. I'm using that raw sienna and a little bit of asphaltum. But there's nothing to say that you have to limit it to that. I'm going to show you something else while I'm doing it that I did not do in the first one, but I don't know. I think it gives this technique a little more versatility. You can use multiple colors doing this. You are not limited to just using the 1 or the 2. So you could use a burnt sienna, or you could use a little bit of red spice. I gravitate towards colors that are a little more on the transparent side. Just a little. There's Kathy Pruitt. Hello. And Carrie Henderson. Hello. It's always so nice to see those names up there. Oh my goodness. I guess Louisiana's getting hit with more storms. Oh my gosh. So I've taken a red. So as I said, you're not limited to just using 1 or 2 colors. If you want to really fire this up a little, bring in a little of that red spice. Look what that does. Just this gorgeous pop of color. But it becomes part of the overall finish. I love that little touch of heat in there. That little touch of heat does wonderful things. And I'm using just a very light touch when I'm doing this. So, in case you were wondering what that brushed application does, look at in here, all this fabulous light, subtle texture in here, all of those little hash marks and heavy brush marks just provide a little something extra for that texture to catch on. So I want to bring in a little more raw sienna. So if you make a mistake with this, say you put a little color on and it's way too strong, and you know it's way too strong, and you want to adjust it and bring it back down, just take a little extra water, bring it out, see that's just water on your applicator, and just very gently wash the surface. 2 things will happen. 1, it's going to pull off the darker value, but at the same time, it's going to expose some of that texture that you left behind with the brush. And that really does bring out that dry plaster look. And it makes for such an awesome background for this type. So you could put almost anything in here. You could put grapes, you could put strawberries, you could put whatever you wanted in here. You know, a basket of fruit, whatever blows your hair back. That's what I tell people. Lynell, hi sweetie. I love the Tuscan look. I always have. I have a technique for doing a faux tile that is really effective that we'll have to do something with at some point. So I'm going to dry this really well, and then we're going to take a large angled shader, nice big one, about 3/4 to a full inch, and we're going to load that up with a little bit of asphaltum. And we're going to float the edges just like this, and then float into the corners and along the bottom. And this just gives the outer edge a little bit more weight. It does not have to be a perfect float. Lots of water, lots of glaze, very little paint. And just a loose application. You don't need to worry about these little teeny tiny meticulous floats. This is a big old sloppy float all along the outside edge. Look at that. Super easy to do. The other fun thing is that because you've got a little bit of actual texture in here, you can take a sanding sponge to it, or your gator, something with a fine sanding paper on it, or even brown paper will do, and just give it a scuff sand, and that will expose a little more texture very easily. Here we are. Oh no, what's wrong, Karen? Oh my gosh, what did you do now? Karen and I go a very long way back. Like almost 40 years back. Did you hurt yourself? Hi, Bet. And there's Dee. Hi, Dee. Nathalie Petit-Clac. Afternoon. Good to have you with us. Hi, Lil. Oh, no, you don't know what you did? That's even worse. Hi, Penny. You're late as usual. And Sandy Fowler. Hi. So we are ready at this point to trace and transfer our line drawing on. The pattern actually has a much cleaner line drawing than the one I'm using. This is my original sketch. And I had to clean it up, but because it was tragic. I'm sorry. It's tragic. The part about this that I really love is that this is a very loose technique. I like to cut things, my line drawings out so that they fit my surface. Uh-oh. So I'm going to tape this in place in a couple of places because it keeps wanting to shift. There we go. Now I'm using a well-used piece of graphite because I really don't want this to be too dark. Stars and garters. Where's my red pen? There it is. Well, don't wait around on that, love. Go get it fixed. So when you're tracing this out, don't really worry too much about the minutia. Like these windows, don't draw a square, just draw a little right angle. You'll see why. I love these little scenes. They're not perfect. The same with these cypress trees. Just scribble them in. Don't need to press too hard, but just scribble them in. There's something very scribbly about this whole thing because that's essentially what I did when I scribbled it. I was not overly interested in a lot of detail. A lot of implied detail, yes, but minute detail, no. So even our little trees in the background here and those larger trees, those tall cypress, everything is scribbled. You do not need to work too hard to get this. So we're not looking for perfection at all. It's just implied. Such a fun way to put an interesting background into a relatively simple piece. I just want to make sure I've got trees. And the buildings are simple. I've kept them as simplistic as possible for a couple of reasons. I just don't see the need to make them overly complex. And you can pick and choose what you want to put in. If you don't like having a ton of these little cypress trees in there, you can leave them out. You know, have one or two here and there, and that's it. As I was working on this, I had a whole bunch of trees here in the foreground, and I left them out because I found it was a bit too busy. I did, however, want this tabletop, this wooden tabletop in place. And again, I did not worry about the minutia or the detail. And there was some more over here that I left out as well. I just felt that it was a bit much. So the landscape, again, super simple. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about all of those teeny tiny little details. They're just simply not that important. It's like all these little vertical lines in the vineyard here. We're going to put them in. So even with our grape leaf here, I just scribble the edge. I don't worry about the minutia. I put in a few lines along there, but they're just a guide. I'm not, again, worrying too much about those tiny little details. Don't forget the stem. Put in a little thingy to remind you that there's vines. Now for the grapes, just use, you can use a shape maker, you can use a stencil to do these circles if you want to, but the painting technique we're using is very loose. So we're not going to be overly concerned with perfectly straight lines and ideal perfect round grapes. We're not going to concern ourselves with all of that overly anyway. And just get the general shape. That's all we need. As long as they're not shaped like eggs, we're good. I liked the well-worn graphite paper for a couple of reasons. And one of them was quite simply that it's not going to be super dark or very heavy. The fact that I'm using a 0.38 pen helps immensely. The 0.38 is very fine, so I don't get heavy, thick graphite lines. The only place I really want you to take a little care is on the stem and the bowl on this wine glass. We want to keep that. We want to keep that stem nice and straight. Because in the end, if it's tilted, That's a problem. And then the bottom. I am a huge fan of anything with an Italian, or I think I'm just addicted to the Mediterranean. I like anything to do with the Italian or the south of France. I loved it there. Let us have a look. I'm still missing a flippin' grape. There we go. So for the glass, take your time tracing it out. We want to keep that glass nice and straight. It's one of the reasons I really like working with this 0.38 pen, is because of that fine tip. I get a nice fine line. I've always found it frustrating when you're painting to have these very thick, heavy graphite lines. And so I try to avoid heavy graphite lines whenever possible and stick with a fine point pen to do my tracing, because I find in the end, you end up with a much better result, and it's so much easier to get those tiny little lines off than it is to get the bigger ones off. Okay, so I've got my wine glass traced. I'm just going to have a quick look. I missed a spot right here. There's a wall here. I missed it. And same there. Okay. And I just make sure I can at least see it. It doesn't have to be perfect. But so I'll move my graphite. Pardon me. I'll move my graphite in a second once I finish the top of this wine glass. I'm going to move my graphite over to our butterfly here. I had a lot of negative space on this side, so I thought a butterfly would do the trick. And then, of course, after I got painted, I had all kinds of second thoughts about it. It very nearly became one of those ones that I painted like 4 or 5 times. But I did, however, erase that butterfly at least 3 times, because I drew it on and then I don't think I'll do it. And then I put it back on and no, I don't think I'll do it. So finally, I just bit the bullet and painted the butterfly. But I'm still sitting here looking at this going, And I think if I were to do it again, I would probably add 2 more butterflies off in the distance. 2 tiny little ones off in the distance. Just because I feel that there's a whole lot of negative space in there that just didn't get used. But I think it's just me. I have a tendency to take my own work apart. Even after it's been long finished. I did that recently with a female cardinal. I wanted to redo it because I thought perhaps I could improve on it. And then at the same time, I wanted to try a different set of pencils. And they're almost identical. So I get the feeling that maybe it's just meant to be like that. So I better check this. Oh, heavens to Betsy. There we go. So I have a Flutterby. So the only thing we have left is our lettering. Oh, we are our own worst critics. That is the truth. I have been known to paint the same thing 3-4 times. I know the lemons I've painted at least 4. Might have been 5, but I may have lost count. But it's quite simply because I have a tendency to second guess my design work. And I can't really tell if I've made that mistake a lot of the time until I have a look at it. Once I have it all laid out and I start to add color, that's usually when I make a decision about whether or not I need to change the design. You know, sometimes you get it right the first time. Other times it'll take a long time to get there. And with the lemons, it took me it took me a long time to get there, but I got there. So we're all traced on. Yikes. Okay, we're not all traced on. Try putting a pizza on it. That'll fill up the space. A pizza? Oh my goodness. I know when I lived there, I used to love it when we would leave the city and go out in the countryside or head up north or something, and driving through it or heading to the coast. That was always the be all and end all. And there was something about the countryside and those beautiful cypress trees, rows of them, large rows marking off properties and farmlands. And I just loved it. There was something almost surreal about it. There we go. So I'm going to take my paper off now. Now I did a chipped finish on the edge of mine, which I really like. I think it kind of gave some boundaries to this piece, putting in that chipped paint finish or chipped plaster finish at the edges. And I'm going to do it again on this one, but I want to show you a different way to highlight it. So on this one, I used that chipped paint technique where you just roll the brush along the edge. And then to highlight the edge, I used a very fine white gel pen to accent it. But there are different ways to do that, which brings us into that whole, the floating thing. So I'm going to grab a round, and I'm using asphaltum for the edge. I was reluctant to use black. I think black is very heavy and whatnot. So I'm going to use asphaltum with a little bit of water in it, and I'm going to roll my edge like so. Now you can be very sparse and minimalistic about it with this, or you can be a little heavy-handed. I happen to like it when it's a little heavy-handed. Just a little. I like the chips, the bobbles, the wobbles in it. I just think it does something for this. So there we have chips, wibbles, and bobbles all along the edge. And I still think that the dark brown look works so much better than a black on this. So I'm going to roll that along till we get that, some areas where it's fairly heavy and other areas where it's less so, a little thin. I like that it gives it that broken look or worn look. So I've got that in there. Now I'm going to dry that really well. Now on the line drawing, I left it without the shape of the surface so that you could utilize this on a variety of surfaces. You could put it on a narrow rectangular piece. You could put it on an 8x10. You could put it on almost anything and enlarge it or reduce it to fit. So as long as it takes up at least 2/3 of the surface, I think you're fine. So here we go. I've got, look at that chipped look. Even without a highlight on it, it looks pretty good. Don't you think? So the whole point of this piece is about floating. Now I have a 3/8 angled shader. And we're going to come back to our base color, which was that almondine. And the reason I chose that is because, one, it's already in this color family, and two, bright white, which is what we used here, is a little bright. So you can take a little tiny float of almondine in just a few locations. It does not have to be everywhere. And leave some spaces. So areas where there is no highlight, but look at the chip to decide that. And so you can just blot that with your fingers lightly and look at the difference. It's not a hard outline. It's broken in places, but it still gives you that highlight at the outside edge. So again, using that original base color, thin it out, put a little water in it, a little bit of glaze, and you can be very selective about where you put it. So once you have that highlight in place, I'm going to show you something really cool. Take a little bit of lamp black. You're going to thin this out quite a bit. And then on the opposite side, see the highlight on this side, I'm going to put a little shadow on the inside edge. Just like this. Directly against it. So it gives you a little more depth. So you can either do it with the ballpoint pen, with that gel pen. You could do that with a Posca pen, a fine Posca pen, or any type of paint marker. You can do it, or you could float it in. I like the float. The float really is quite nice. And it's a bit more subtle than that harsh white outline. It's harsh, but it works. And you're keeping that float very, very light. So make sure your almondine is thinned out. A little water. And look at that. So you get a really nice texture at the edge, but it's still using the same color family, colors from that same family. So it's your original base color, so it's going to work. The thing to remember is you're not going to put it everywhere. So say our light, in this case, our light source is from here. It's coming from the upper left. So all of our highlighting can go on the left side, like so. And then it can kind of peter out. And on these areas here along the bottom, you're only going to have them in a few spots. You know, areas where they would catch the light. You know, where it's closer down like this. And then none on this side, because we're going to take a little bit of that lamp black and we're going to float up to the edge. And it is a very weak float. We're not using a ton of color. You're going to float right up to the edge of that chip. Into that. So floating gives you the ability to use a variety of colors in one piece and use them in transparent layers. And it is very effective when you plan out or strategize about where that color is going to go. And your light source will decide that for you, as it's done in this case. So we have a highlight on that edge, and then we have that wonderful texture on this edge. So again, little shadow here and there opposite that highlight. I love that little float. It just makes such a difference to the end result. And there you go. And that's just done with a simple little float to the outside edge. Easy peasy. Now, I'm going to rinse out my brush. I'm using a 3/8. It's a small angled shader. And I'm going to use a little bit of my Joe Sonia, see if I can do it without knocking it over this week like I did last week. So a little bit of Joe Sonia. We're going to thin out some asphaltum. Heavily thinned. And we're going to use our asphaltum for shading and bringing in this vineyard. So the vineyard is going to have a float of asphaltum right along that line. And it's loose and imperfect. And it's just going in there like that. And I have too much glaze in my brush. There we go. You know you have too much glaze when your brush is suddenly, your float is suddenly changing into a puddle. So draw that down. So we have a series of little floats, and I know you can hardly see them, but there they are. I'm going to make mine a little darker because I can hardly see them. There we are. Just following the line of that vineyard. So we got a little float in there. Look at that. And then we have all of this landscape. I'm using just the tip of my brush. And I'm just basically scribbling in a float. Like so. So that's all those bushes back there. You know, ta-da! And then we have all these lines here. Pretty spiffy. We have a walkway. We're going to put a float down the left side of that little cottage. See, we've got a little sidewalk that's running right down here. Not a sidewalk, a little walkway. Comes from between these two cypress and down. We're going to go between those two cypress and put a float along the edge and down. And don't forget our little trees back there. I call this scribbling. It's a float, but it's a scribble. So I'm still blending it, keeping the darkest value on the point of the brush. Like so. And you're just making little puffy clouds. Exactly. It seems to infer clouds. That float looks like. Sometime can you show us how to use a fan brush? Absolutely. Fan brushes are great. So we have a house, and it has two walls that are facing away from the sun right here. So we're going to put a float of asphaltum right there and under the eaves of the roof line. Comme ça. And we're also going to do that to the roof on that side. Literally float a little color in so that it just makes that one side of the roof a little darker. Seems pretty simple, doesn't it? So I'm going to rinse out my angled shader, and we're going to switch to a 10-aught liner. Now you can use whichever type you're most comfortable with. I've got myself a nice little black gold 10-aught. That's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use a little bit of Joe Sonia's Fast Dry Glaze and some asphaltum, and I'm going to thin it out quite a bit. I want this to be a little darker. And what's for dinner tonight? We are doing jerked chicken on the grill. with raisin rice and steamed Brussels sprouts with lemon. That's what we're having tonight. So I'm just using the liner to draw in my house. This is where we're going to put in a little bit of detail. Oh, Brenda, have a wonderful time. So there's my roof line. Now there's two little chimneys. Karen, you've had my jerk chicken before. Two little chimneys on there. I have always loved this type of work in the background. It appeals to me on a lot of levels. So we have a wonderful little arched doorway on both sides. And the windows here are essentially an upside down L. And you can make them into like a little curve on the inside edge. These are your windows. I like doing them like this instead of just a little square. Although the square works, particularly on this side because it's not getting any of that as much of the light. But these little windows, you can simply imply that they're square. Besides, most of the windows in these big Italian homes are anything but square. They're usually very tall and narrow. And they don't have screens. There we are. So little windows. So far, so good. And this is where I like to do these cypress trees. I'm going to bring this up a little closer so you can get a clear. So I start at the top of the cypress tree and I sort of do a little diagonal line on the back side and then keep it fluffy so that it literally shades itself all in one go. So diagonal down to the bottom of the tree. And the whole point is, pardon me, the point behind doing them this way is to keep them looking kind of fluffy but shaded at the same time. So they have super simple. Hi, Bobby. Gail, I'm using a 10-aught extra long detail liner. I'm using a Dynasty Black Gold. Yeah. I usually use a micron, but I found this in my paint bin the other day, and I've been using it ever since. Hey, Nance. That's my girl. So awesome to have supportive friends. Two of my oldest ones in the world are in here today. I think Nance is the only one that I've known longer than Karen. Well, except for Debbie, Deborah Schwartz. I've known her since I was like 3, so. Oops. Military families have a tendency to be long and lifelong friendships when you have the good fortune to have met some really awesome ones. Oh, Saturday routine, coffee, PJs, and rain. Well, I'm glad I could entertain you for a little while. Where's Miss Lucy? So this one is coming, I really like this little landscape. It's starting to really pull together. We'll do more with it, obviously. So I've got another little cypress tree right here. To me, this is just fun. Leanne, you can't find antique green or matcha green. You can use lush green and margarita. Those will both work. Oh, Robin Storm has a birthday tomorrow. I have to remember that. Seems to me I wished her a happy birthday not too long ago and it wasn't actually her birthday. Oh well. So here we are. We got one more tree to go in here. One more cypress. And it's getting a little closer to home. There we go. I've always found it interesting how those little, simple little landscapes actually work very well. So I'm going to take a little bit of warm white. A dandelion yoga? A dandelion yoga. Living dandelion or dead dandelion? So we're going to use a round brush for this next step. I like a round. Round is a happy brush to have. This is fun and simple. So I've got a little bit of warm white and a lot of water. Yeah. So I'm using a thinned warm white and I'm going to just very carefully put a wash of thinned warm white on the face of this villa, whatever you want to call it. Just a little there. It needs a little on the roof line right here. Just a little. It doesn't go all the way up the roof line. And again, on that little small attachment to the house. And a little on that roof line. Now, the fun part about this type of... That's quite true. We grow everywhere and anywhere. Yeah. This is the fun part about working with this type of technique, is that you can take a little bit... Remember the red that we used in here? You want to bring in a little terracotta on that roof. Bring in just a little wash of it. A little darker on the other side. A little bit of color on that terracotta roof. There's nothing that says you can't add color to that. So I've got a little bit of new leaf. Just a little. You could use avocado toast if you wanted to. I'm going to use a little bit of new leaf. So I've got a little bit of new leaf. And I'm just going to bring a little wash of that green into those trees that we did. Just a tiny bit. You can stroke it in. It's a float of heavily thinned color. So now, with just those two things, we have more color in our landscape. So I'm going to dry this. There we go. And then we're going to use that angled shader again to bring in a little bit of warm white into our landscape. So we need to highlight the trees. So I'm going to use a little float of warm white, just a titch of it, into those big cypress trees, like so. Essentially, we're giving this a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of light. Now, opposite that first shadow, we're going to put a little bit of white in here. Just on those open areas, just like that, because our wine areas are still getting sunlight. And then we have a little stone wall right here. At least that's what I'm thinking it is. Why not? Little stone wall. A little highlight on the front of that. And I'm going to put a little highlight on the opposite side of our little walkway. Keep it light. Little touches of white here and there, never a bad idea. So there's our landscape. Nothing too over the top. It's not a difficult piece to do. I love the idea that we can add a little blush of color to those things. Off you go, Sandy. Oh my heavens. Yeah, I just put a little touch of green. Why not? Now, I did all of the only thing I didn't do in this one was add the green. I did bring in a little red. I just used a lot less of it. I did bring in all of that asphaltum in there and that little bit of white. And all it was for was just to highlight those areas and give them a bit more contrast. So I've done a little more with this by bringing in a little more color. But it works. Like, how fun is that? The whole point behind a lot of this is just simply to use minimal amounts of paint, minimal amounts of color to get, you know, a nice little landscape back there that is not the focal point, but part of this. So, such a super simple piece to do. So we've got our landscape in there. I'm going to let that dry completely, and we're going to move over to the tabletop on this one. There is a rustic wooden tabletop on there, and I'm loading my angled shader with a little asphaltum, and I'm floating the edge like so. Now this one is not perfectly square, so we're going to float the edge so that it's a little ragged, and then we're going to give it a chip right here. So I have some line work coming off of it. So essentially I've created the tabletop with minimal effort. So the tabletop, like so. Want it a little more solid, I think. And then I'm using the chisel edge of the brush to create a little texture in our wooden table. And coming back toward our fruit. Now you can take that same asphaltum and you're going to float in and around and under these grapes and under that leaf, like so. Because I want it fairly dark in there, in and around. I'm not worrying overly much about that. I want to bring that float all the way around the front of our wine glass, like so. And around to the back of our thing. I just want that to sort of disappear back there. So I use the angled shader to create the tabletop and to shade underneath the grapes and around the bottom of that wine glass. So we're going to tackle the leaf first. And the color that I chose to use for that is avocado toast. And that's this was a new color last year, so we're DA430. Hi, Jill. And Terry. Hi, Terry. And Loretta Lynn. And Beryl. Hi, hun. It's that holiday weekend. I've been very remiss. Happy Memorial Day weekend to all of my friends in the States. So I'm going to float this leaf. And then you're all going to look at me like I'm nuts. So I've loaded my 3/8 angle. And I'm going to literally scribble darkest value towards that edge of the leaf. Like so. I love doing this stuff. I haven't done a Tuscan theme or an Italian themed thing in so long, and I was really looking forward to it. So I was really excited when I was playing with this idea about how well it could turn out. I love this. This type of artwork appeals to me in a great many ways. So that's how I base coated and paint and shaded. I floated the whole leaf in. Super simple. Darkest value to the outside edge, lightest value towards the center. And I'm going to dry that. And then while that's drying, we're going to use one of Dakwart's newer colors. This is Cherry Merlot. This color is just yummy. Yummy. I love this color. It's so rich. It's a transparent mulberry tone. It's really, really pretty. And we're going to use that thinned. And with a round brush, lots of color. Oh, I love this tone. So pretty. I'm going to thin that out quite a bit because I'm going to just follow the initial shape of those grapes like so. So this part makes base coating these things super simple. So don't freak out, but we're going to put this color right over top of that stem too, like so, because we have grapes in behind that wine glass, and we want that color to peek through. So we're putting that wash on like that. Ta-da! It is such a pretty color, that Cherry Merlot. It's a purplish red, and it's quite deep. I know it's such a great grape color. And then we're going to use that same mix for the wine in the glass. maybe even it's a little too thin, but I'd rather put on 5 or 6 layers than put on too much the first time. There we go. So when I paint the wine, I don't paint it all the way to the edge. I stop and leave like 1/16 of an inch on either side. Hi, Patsy. When did this color come out? Cherry Merlot came out last year, I believe. Perhaps even the year before. Just a moment, I'll tell you. 2024. Came out in 24. So look at that. Oh my gosh. So I make a point whenever Decor puts new colors out. I try to at least find a way that I can incorporate them into what I paint. And it's not always as simple as it sounds. I tend to like working with colors that I can make transparent quite easily. And so I gravitate to those quite a lot. It took me a long time to use colors like Stormy, and like Stormy is a great color. I love Stormy. This one has that very cool blue, gray, and there's just a touch of purple in it. It's just a fabulous color. Took me a while to get there, but I got there. So now I use that one quite frequently. And the same with Twilight. Twilight has this wonderful purple quality as well. And Avocado Toast. That's another green. It came out at the same time. Took me a while, but now I love it. I don't think so. Oop, nasty and wet. I don't think there's 2 lights going. But then again, we were trying to connect earlier to TikTok, so I have no idea. We may have messed it up. Who knows? So while we have that Cherry Merlot out, I'm going to come over to our butterfly. And I'm going to paint the inside portions. I've got way too much glaze in my brush. Here we go. That inside portion of our butterfly on the wings, I'm going to paint it with Cherry Merlot. Pretty color. It's nice and rich. Oops. There we go. Oh my stars and garters. There we are. And I'm going to dry this really well. Now, one of the colors that came out this year is called After Dark. Now, if you don't have After Dark, I know it's a new color, so it's not everybody has them yet. If you don't have an After Dark, you can use dioxazine purple. But After Dark, somebody asked me about what this color. I find After Dark is actually a really good description for it. This is more like an aubergine. It's a very deep, dark purple. And it's exquisite. It's also quite transparent. So I'm going to load my brush to float. And we're going to use that After Dark to shade the backside of our grapes. And it's a fairly loose application. We're not going to putz with it too much, if you know what I mean. I don't want to make everything utterly perfect. I love the idea of having irregularities in some of these grapes where they're not utterly perfect. And we're not, it doesn't matter if it's perfectly accurate. I'm when it comes to anything to do with tech, if it doesn't work, is similar to black plum. No, black plum is a more opaque and leans into the more reddish side of purple. This leans into like that dark blue side of purple, and it is very dark, very rich. This is a really elegant, I think that's a really good way to describe this one. It's an elegant dark purple. So you can see these grapes are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm shading around them, between them. I'm trying to keep the darkest value to the back of the fruit, to the right-hand side of the fruit. So if you're going to start back here, like so, whenever you're floating something like this, try to keep that whole chisel edge on the surface because it'll help move color to the next one. So I'm putting a float in, nice wide float. Get a little more glaze in my brush here. Paint's not moving the way I want it to. There we go. I love this color. It's one of those tones that sort of catches you by surprise. Whenever I get new colors, I like to take out a piece of white paper and a piece of a substitute for After Dark. Dioxazine purple would be the one that I would recommend the most. The surface that I'm using is the 12-inch Half Moon. I love this surface. I've used this one quite a bit. I've used it for those cute little, the sunflower one last year. I've used this surface a lot. I really like it. I've done daisies on it. I've done sunflowers on it. I've done a bunch of things on it. And this one, I think this is a great surface because it is a good size and it translates nicely to almost any design. So there we go. We've got that first shading on there. Nothing fancy by any means. So now we're going to do the same thing to the wine. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the wine glass and I'm going to put a nice float, darkest value to the right-hand side, all the way up to the edge, and I'm going to stop at the edge. Right there, that first line. That first line. Oh goodness, I got way too much glaze again. What is with me today? So then you're going to put a float of that same dark color. Leave a little gap from that float at the bottom and this float up top here. And this one up top is going to extend a little further. It's also a little weaker across the top. And that's going to give you that shift from top to bottom. So I'm going to dry this and then I'm going to repeat that. Oh yes, yeah, we did door crowns on similar surfaces. So again, I'm going to float, nice float of that After Dark, such a fabulous color, and then leave a tiny little space and then float the top of the wine till it comes across there. So that when you look at it a little closer, you can see that it's got a top flat and then the bottom of the glass. And let's bring that same purple over to our butterfly. So I'm going to take that After Dark and I'm going to put a float right there from the top of the color down against the body, up against the body, and along the edge of the wing, just like that. And I'm going to let it dry and then I'm going to repeat that. We all have days, mine is every day. I have more than my fair share of days, I think. I've had at least 7 this week. Come on. Now, the purpose behind using floats to put that base color in, like that light wash of color, was to give us that depth. That's what we wanted from this. We wanted the depth. We wanted that illusion that there's light passing through it. And that worked very well. Oh, goodness. There we go. I love that After Dark. It just makes the colors so rich. So interestingly enough, in this year's lineup, there was lots of purple. And one of the colors that I have fallen in love with is this one. This is Atmosphere. And this is a purple gray. It's such a pretty color. And the color number for this one is DA443. So this one has such a lovely tone. I was trying to think where it fell, like give it a color, like Victorian lace. It has this wonderful velvety gray tone to it. It's just so pretty. We're going to use that to put in a very muted highlight on the top of our wine here. Of course, it helps if you actually keep some paint in the brush. I overblended. So I'm using a little bit just at that edge, just a little float. And I think that one was even a little too heavy, but there it is. Little float up there. Going to do the same thing to the wings on this butterfly. So each one of those little sections on the wing is going to get a tiny little highlight just at the tip of that section. Don't be afraid to use your fingertip to blot it if you get too much color on, like I did. Blot. Or you could be smart and switch to a smaller shader. But I really like this sort of, that little float at the tip. It gives a little texture to these portions of the butterfly. Well, they may not be accurate, but really. Which gray? It's a new color right here. It's called Atmosphere, and it is a purple tone, but it's a gray. Hi, Sharon. Oh, I don't know what the double live thing is about, but we'll figure it out. Don't worry. Here we go. So I've got that little float in, and it's a tiny little float. Look, itty bitty. It just adds a little bit of light at the tip of those things. And then I'm going to take that same color, and we're going to put a simple and small highlight on each of those grapes. And I'm just trying to keep this as narrow as possible, a small, small float. Good grief. I keep over blending it. There we go. I probably need a cleaner palette. That's probably my issue. There we are. So on the highlight, you're just using a small stroke. I'm not looking for perfection. There we go. I like this, it's keeping it really simple. I can't zoom in, unfortunately. This is the most we can zoom. But I can certainly bring the piece closer to the camera for a minute. So that little float is just a little bit, just to give these grapes a little light. Doesn't have to be on all of them either. Just some of the ones that are more exposed to the light, I guess. So that rounds them out quite nicely. I'm also going to bring a little bit of that in here. So I'm going to dry that. They look like Concord grapes. What's a substitute for atmosphere? Hang on one sec. You can use lavender haze and then add a little gray to it. 1 second. Wisteria. Wisteria will work just fine. So, grapes are starting to look like something here. So the fun part about this, again, we're not looking for perfection. I'm going to use a little bit of thinned warm white. And I'm going to brighten my highlight on a few of these grapes. And all this is going to do is just crisp up the edge of the grape a little. And it brightens the highlight, but I'm not burying that atmosphere. I want to keep that sort of dry look. Nancy versus Tracy. You got power back? Did I miss something? Did you miss anything extremely exciting? Unless you think floating is exciting. Here we go. Ta-da! So that little bit of warm white just pops them a little. So I'm going to take my warm white and my glaze. I'm going to make a thin glaze or a wash of warm white. And I'm going to put a highlight on the front of my wine glass. Just like so. It's just a stroke, thinned warm white all the way down, and then take that stroke to a point right in front of the stem. Have I said oops yet? Yes, I've said oops numerous times today. And then I'm going to put another highlight, the mirror of this one, at the back of the wine glass, and it stops at the edge of the wine. It always amazes me how cool this looks. I'm going to take that same warm white and I'm going to put a wash of that color onto the stem and down onto the foot of our wine glass, like so. Remember, it is heavily thinned and quite transparent. Don't overthink it. There we go. Now I'm going to take that 3/8 angled shader and I'm going to pick up a tiny amount of warm white. And I'm going to use just the tip of the brush. Perhaps a bit more paint would be appropriate. I'm going to use just the tip of the brush. There we go. And I'm using sort of a float, but just a little. There we go. And I'm going to bring that over. And then I'm going to do it on the same way on the other side. And that's essentially to fill that gap between the wine and the edge of the glass. However, we don't want a hard white line. That comes a little later on. Here we go. And then at the back of the glass, what happened to make the letters fade? Oh, they're still there. We're going to put a float right across the back of the wine glass. Just like that. So our wine glass is starting to take shape. Now, one of the other new colors the Decowork put out this year. Last year they put out Grecian blue. This year they put out Indigo Pop. Now, I am not a particularly blue person to start with. So for me to use a blue, there has to be a good reason for it. Now, typically I use a color called Bahama Blue. And but I've been, as I said, been trying to incorporate some of the newer colors into some of my work just to see how they're going to work. And this Indigo Pop is quite pretty. So I'm going to use a little bit of it right here. I've thinned it out just like I've done to every other color. I'm going to put a little Indigo Pop right there and down the right side of our stem, like so. Need a little stroke there and a little stroke here. And I've got it very thin, so little blue. Now, all that blue is going to do is help give us more of that glass look. And then I'm going to use a little bit of it coming down this gap here on this side and here. So we've got a little bit of blue giving our glass a little more realism. And that little stroke of blue does make a huge difference. It gives it the illusion that it's dimensional and that it shifts how things look in the background. And you can also bring a little bit of it in here as well if you feel the need. Just a little bit. I like a small amount of blue in glass. Whether it's a Bahama Blue, whether it's a really bright blue, like a true blue or something like that. a little bit of blue does wonders for making things look a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to use some thinned warm white, because this is where the difference lies when you're painting something to look like glass. It doesn't have to have hard lines, but you do need to have some fairly good highlights. So I'm mimicking the blue. I put the line down the back. I'm mimicking the blue and coming down this way and mirroring it on that side. So a little more realism. Substitute for indigo blue, Grecian blue or Bahama blue. Just some kind of bright blue. So I've got nice little highlight there and there. And I'm going to have to put in a little bit at the top edge right here. And again at the back. Again, we're going to mirror the highlight, so it's going to be right here. And I like that fine line. I'm going to do one here as well. Oopsie. Gotta love my oopsies. Do I have a substitution cheat sheet? I have an older one. I really should update it. What is it about blue that makes it look more realistic? It changes the temperature of the glass. That's what it is. If you've ever held up a really thick piece of crystal or a thick piece of glass, there's always that little hint of blue, and it's essentially it's acting like a prism, and so it's picking up a little bit of the blue from the spectrum, from the light. The glass isn't actually blue, but it's picking up a blue from the spectrum. Now you can go to town with this. You can make this as realistic as you want. None of the rest of it is. So that's why I wanted a semi-realistic or an implied realism in the wine glass. I didn't want a truly realistic wine glass, but I want to have the proper things in place. And of course, the light is the most important part because that's what gives everything its look. There we go. So here we are. I'm going to bring in a little more white back here because I've kind of lost the shape of the glass there for a bit. And I want to keep this glass looking translucent, transparent. So there we are. Not bad. Not bad for an old broad, as they say. I love the look of this. I just think that this is so cool. Now, this highlight that's back here, that mirrors, you've got to bring that all the way up. Right there. It has to go to the top edge because that's where it's mirroring from. So this one curves up to the top edge of the glass and this one's on the foreground, so these two are mirrored. So get that little highlight in there. We've got our blue in there. Not a bad little wine light. New cheat sheet. Great idea. So our glass looks pretty good. Our grapes are looking good. I'm going to grab my angled shader. I'm going to take a little bit of my thinned warm whites. And I'm going to give a few of these a little highlight. You can do this with the liner brush, whatever you like. you know. I don't put these highlights on every grape because I don't think they need it. Some of them just don't ever hit that, but I like a brighter highlight, so I like to bring it in. Looky there. So we have, so let's go to our butterfly. We're going to, or no, let's do our leaf first. That's what we'll do. I'm going to give myself a clean palette because this one is a travesty. And the color we're going to work with in my spare time, yeah. The color we're going to work with is this one. This is Black Forest Green, a color that sat in my painting cabinet for years, and I never picked it up simply because it just, every time I looked at it, it was, oh, it's too cold. It's such a cold looking green. And then I discovered that if I paired it with warmer greens, it became, and paired it with those yellowish greens, it gave me everything I ever wanted as far as depth and that gorgeous tone. So we're going to use that Black Forest Green. Again, I'm thinning this out a little bit because it's a very strong color, but it is fabulous. And I'm going to use this color straight down the center vein of my leaf. It's incredibly rich. I love the tone of this. So those veins coming off of my leaf are getting that float. Same with the veins coming off here. I'm going to give those a float with it. And I just love this tone. I just think it's yummy. Look at that. And I love that I can bring a little of it in to the edges of the leaves. Look at that. Just pops everything. Look. Gorgeous tone. And at the same time, you don't lose any of that other wonderful soft green. Oh yes, absolutely. If you want to dry brush those highlights in, by all means, you're going to get a nice soft highlight. In this case, I wanted more of a painterly look to this, less of the toll painting look and more of a free form type. So, but if you want to dry brush them, absolutely, go for it. I'm loving that green. Black Forest Green very quickly became a favorite. Now I'm going to give it one more because I want some nice rich shadows in there. Look at that. Oh, yummy. Yum, yum, yum. There we go. And then I'm going to use a little bit of Margarita. Margarita is one of my go-tos. I use it a lot. It's a high yellow green, and the only problem with it is it tends to be a little on the transparent side. So when you're using it for highlighting, if your undercoat is not very transparent, it's a good idea to bring in a little bit of warm white or even a soft gray, something to give it a little more opacity because it does not cover very well. So I'm going to highlight opposite my shading with that fabulous Margarita green. I love this color. It's just so pretty. And it does wonders for this because now it gives all of these sections of this leaf. You can have some fun with it. So I've got a shadow on one side, so I'm going to highlight all of those little vein lines first. Just like that. Because I can. Look at that. So all of my little vein lines that I worked so hard to get in there have now been highlighted. And I can dry those. And then I'm going to come back in with a nice generous float. Down the center vein, like so. So there's your brighter highlight. Right there. You can bring it up onto the leaves a little bit. You can brighten it out here as well. Brighten the tips of those leaves. I just love this color for this. So, wham, we've got some really details on that leaf now. Really great detail. So I'm going to dry it, and then we're going to deepen it. Now, one of the things that I've always thought is such a great idea is bringing in a little of reflected color, either from the wine or the grapes. So I'm using a little bit of that cherry Merlot. You could use the After Dark. I did in the first one. So I'm going to bring in a little cherry Merlot, little float at the edge of the leaf. Look at what this does. Get that little luscious pop of color. And you can bring it in just a few little spots at the edge of the leaf. You don't have to go hog wild with it, but it is a lovely addition to the edges of the leaf. Just makes everything come right together. Hi there. Hi, puppy dog. What you doing, Mace? Yeah? Hi. So grab some asphaltum. We're going to tone all of this, including the grapes. Oops. Almost got asphaltum everywhere. So we're going to take a little bit of asphaltum, and we're going to come in here behind those grapes, and we're going to tone that leaf and deepen the float down the center veins. That little bit of asphaltum. This is what breaks those leaves, gives those leaves that richness. So we've got fabulous leaves. And we're also going to bring in some asphaltum on these grapes back here. On the bottom, right in here. Don't be afraid to come in with that highlight or that shadow. It's not going to hurt a thing. Float around the base of your wine glass. Just like that. You can take that opportunity to darken some shadows as you're working. I've got a nice little chip out of that. I'm going to bring in a little more texture on that wood. I'm going to take a little bit of warm white. I'm going to put a highlight on the ends of this board here. There we go. And as I said, you can come back in with more of that after dark and deepen all of your grapes wherever you feel it needs it. You can deepen shadows back there. You can do the same thing to your wine glass. If you really want your wine glass to take on that wine, to take on a lot of depth, you can take a little bit of lamp black, blend it out. You don't want this colorful strength. And then just deepen that wine just a scooch. Little float of lamp black back there. Little float at the top. So your wine suddenly becomes very deep and very lush and very yummy looking. So you can do the same thing to your grapes as well. So if you feel that they're not quite dark enough in places, or if that shadow, there's nothing to say that you can't bring in a little bit of lamp black to deepen those areas, or just come back in with a little bit of your original shading color, which is that after dark. I love that the wine keeps that richness with that base color of the cherry merlot, and then deepening everything with that after dark. It's just such a gorgeous and lush color. And I'm losing my voice again. So we've got our leaf done. We've separated things a little bit more. I'm looking at my leaf. I need a little more color in here. It wasn't quite dark enough. Here we go. Yay. There we are. That's better. So I'm going to dry that. And we're going to add a stem and some vines. You gotta have stems. I'm going to use a little bit of that Black Forest green. I'm going to throw a little asphaltum into it, just to keep the tone. And I'm going to give us a nice little stem off that leaf. And then I'm going to pick up a little margarita on it. Oof, my brush is not nearly enough water. Here we are. So we've got a little vine coming off of it there. And then I want one here as well. Just a little one. And we'll dry that. And then I'm going to cheat and show you something really fun. So I've got Posca pen. I have a black one. Gail, I have a link. If you look on the caption for this, I have a link that you can follow. Just order them right from Decawart, and I'll give you my coupon code so you can get a discount. It's Tracy M15. So I have a black Posca pen that I'm quite enamored with. So I'm going to use the paint pen to base coat my butterfly's body. Ta-da! And then I'm going to use the paint pen to trace the wings, like so. I absolutely love my Posca pens. And I'm finding more and more uses for them every day. These new colors are fabulous, and these Posca pens are to die for. There is a great discount on the Posca pens. Where did I see that? I think it was Michael's. Michael's has a sale on. Any idea when these new colors will arrive in Canada? They should be here anytime. They're usually a couple of weeks behind our pals in the US, usually. Canada Customs isn't as hard to get things through as it has been in the past, so it should be here soon. And I know that Stockade will be carrying them, as will Country Bear. So I'm using my Posca pen to trace out the shapes on my butterfly wings. just like that. Super easy. And then, because it's a Posca pen, it is acrylic paint, so you can basically just color it in, or you can use your lamp black paint, either one. Since I've got my Posca pen going, I'm going to use the pen. There are so many wonderful tools for artists to use now without having to worry about whether or not it's going to be compatible. I absolutely love my Posca pens. I have 4 sets of them because I'm weak and I have an Amazon account. But I got these ones, the pin type, I got through Dick Blick. When it comes to buying certain supplies that are perhaps difficult or, a little sparse here in Canada at times, Dick Blick has been one of those companies that I've always gone to. Another one that I use quite frequently is a company based in the UK, which is Jackson Art, another company I absolutely love. I've never been disappointed by anything I've ever ordered through them. And the ordering process has always been simple. They do take PayPal. They're phenomenal. So look at that. We've got our butterfly, and we used a Posca pen. Now, you can also use the Posca pen to do the white. I'm weak when it comes to my Posca pens. I love these. So I love the fact that I can, add dip dots and lines to my butterflies easily. Super simple. And I like the fact that I don't have to worry about them not being compatible with my Americana because they are acrylic paint. I can use them with anything. And they work beautifully. And the fact that I can get them in so many different colors. I'm a weak woman. Yes, I'm weak. Hey, my husband never gets between me and my art supplies. Speaking of art supplies, there's a coupon code at the top of the homepage on my website that says Happy May Long 26. The coupon code is good until Monday, and it takes 30% off of any surfaces. So if you need surfaces for whatever, and we are fully stocked, I will adjust the inventory on this one because we have about, I think, 18 of them left. And I'll adjust it because I don't think that's what it says on the website. But we do have these in stock. We have a lot of surfaces in stock right now. So if there's anything that you need or you're looking for, go and check. And don't forget to use that coupon code. It's May Long, all one word, May Long 26. Yep. So we've got our butterfly done, and I put my Posca pens away. Now you can use your liner brush or rigger to do the lettering on this, but I have been having entirely too much fun with my Posca pens lately. So that's what I've been using to do this type of writing. This is a handwritten script, and oops, see, there it is, another oops, a handwritten script. I'm going to have to fix that now. And so markers, Posca pens, even a Sharpie. Those type of things work very well for this type of handwritten script. It is, although it's perfectly you're perfectly capable of painting them. I found that using the pen, I think the style of it suits the pen better than the brush. Although you can certainly use a brush to paint this. I've had such a blast with my Posca pens doing lettering. I just really like how they come out. So I've got the black on there. Now you can use you could use another Posca pen to do this, but it is a very fine line that we're going to do next. So I'm taking a tiny amount of warm white and mix it with a little bit of glaze. And I'm just going to put a thin white line on the left side of the letter with the liner brush. You could do it with a gel pen too. I mean, whatever works for you. If you have it handy, then use it. I'm never one to say don't use a product unless it's really going to cause a problem. If you don't have the Posca pens, but you have a white gel pen, go ahead and use the white gel pen. And I'm thinking I should have used the white gel pen because this brush is not behaving. I don't like it when brushes don't behave. So try my gel pen. There we go. That's better. Good gravy, Marie. So I like just a little highlight on these letters, just to the left side, simply because it is a very fine font, and that little highlight sort of draws the eye to it a little bit, so makes it a little bit better. There we go. And that's really the best reason I can think of to use a white pen, is to draw the eye towards whatever you've painted. I love a white gel pen, and it works exceptionally well, especially when it's a nice bright white like this one. This is a Uniball Signo. So I'm going to dry that really well. I have a liner brush that just, I don't know what it is about that one, but it does not, it's fine if I'm doing something thick, but if I have to do something fine, it wants to go sideways. The pen is a 0.7 millimeter. It's all one word, Myrnie. May long 26. Or does it say 26? Honestly, sometimes I'm just not that bright. I'll tell you in a second. Yeah, May long 26, all one word, no spaces. So I've got a couple little things left to do because I can't just leave it as is because I'm going to putz with it because it's me. I putz with things. So I have a black gel pen, and this part I really like because it helps add some other details to that. Okay, Myrnie, I'll have a look and see. Maybe there's a problem with it. It shouldn't. But then again, you never know. I've had issues with the computers this week, so I'm going to put some vertical lines on that line between, just some simple vertical lines, about 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch apart, using a little bit of thin dish Faltum because, it's a vineyard. So just a few. So I'm going to dry that real quick. No problem, honey. I don't know what it is, but even my big computer, which never gives me a problem, has been acting up. I have no idea why. Yesterday, I was took me 2 days to get this pattern printed up because it drove me crazy. Every time I would try to insert one of the pictures, Microsoft Word would crash. So I'm taking my gel pen and I'm going to use that to do my landscape a little bit. It's the nice thing about gel pens. You can do all sorts of fun things with them. And I love this 0.38 because it's so fine. Yeah, computer gremlins. I've had my fair share of computer gremlins lately. I'm not a big fan. Oh, you know what? On Christmas ornaments, I think that Posca pens are just like the bee's knees. Because you can put wonderful little details in so simply. So, as I said, I'm just using my gel pen to sort of scribble in some of these details. Like, I love the fact that you can use just irregular lines. Add little extras to it. Add the details in and around your cypress trees. Scribble them in so that they take on a little more oomph. I love this. You can detail your little house too if you want. You can add some more detail to that. But it makes for such a simple way to add those details. There's that fabulous little wall that we've got going in there. And we only have a couple more little steps to do. And then Renee's going to set up for the wheel. Easy peasy. I like doing a little bit at the edges of scribblies at the edges of the leaves. It just makes things interesting and fun. And you could add minute little details too if you want to. You could bring that black into the grapes if you want to. You could add details to the butterfly's wings if you want to. So you do whatever your heart desires when it comes to this. And then I like using my gel pen to put my scriblature on. And then I'm going to go over to my fugly brush because this is my favorite thing ever. I'm going to thin out a little bit of asphaltum. And I'm going to spatter my surface a little bit. I love a good spatter. And then dry it and then have a look, see if there's anything you want to adjust, anything you want to change, anything you want to enhance. I'm looking at a couple of things right here. But you can have so much fun just with floating and line work, and it makes for such a fun piece for your home. I love doing this. Anything to do with Tuscany, I love. So there you go. There's our Buon Appetito. Fun piece. Where's the wheel? There it is. So just to reiterate, we have some wonderful colored pencil sets, 2 of them to give away. And we have a fabulous set of mini brushes from Dynasty in the black gold. You're going to love those too. And of course, Renee and I always have some goodies for you. We have the artist pin in there, plus a pin kit, and a few other little wonderful things tucked into a create bag just for you. And we're going to spin the wheel and find out who's going to get those in the mail. Linda Johnson. Awesome. Linda Stevens Johnson. Don't forget, you have to let us know where you are, where we have to deliver it. So head over to the website, click on the contact list, and please send us your shipping information. We only hang on to them for 2 weeks, and then they go back in the bin. So be sure to send us your shipping information so that we can get it out to you as soon as possible. With that, number 1, Linda Stevens Johnson, and the next one goes to I'm trying to see the Robin Richer. Awesome. That's fabulous. So Linda Stevens Johnson and Robin Richer. Make sure you send us your shipping information so we can get your goodies out to you as soon as possible. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this piece as much as I did. I had a blast doing this. Next Saturday, we're going to be doing a piece for the 4th of July. So come and join me then. We're going to be painting some luscious watermelon and some fun lettering. So we will see you again soon. Love ya. Mwah. Stay safe.
And pet your dog.
And pet your dog.
Gotta pet the dog.
Awesomeness. Okay, I gotta